Well, as promised on Xcel Outdoors today, we've got Matt Solberg with us. Matt is an avid duck hunter, goose hunter. He's been guiding and outfitting for many years. Matt, thanks for being on the show with us today, man.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, born and raised in Appleton. Started duck, goose hunting, and deer hunting early age.
Yeah.
Big family tradition, as it is with most of the state.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then after high school, did a little bit of time in the Marine Corps where I wasn't able to duck and goose hunt as much.
That's right.
And after that, I got out, moved back to Wisconsin here, and picked up duck hunting again, and got linked in with a guy that had started Behind the Blinds Labradors already.
Right.
And he took me out on a hunt, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I started hunting with him more, and he started asking me if I was, interested in helping him and stuff like that. So he helped me train my first dog, and in exchange, I helped him do some of the grunt work that's involved.
That's
in
right, paying your dues.
Decoys, yeah, all that stuff. And
that's great.
Just kind of went from there, and it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're excited to have Matt with us today. He's going to give us a good overview, like I had mentioned prior, of some duck hunting and goose hunting techniques, gear he likes to use, some calling, some decoy placement stuff. So thanks for tuning in.
Welcome back to Xcel Outdoors. I'm Matthew Solberg. Just going to talk about some of the items, the personal items that one might need, whether you're new to the sport or you're just getting your feet wet in it and you're trying to acquire more gear and figure out what do I need to hunt from early October all the way through the end of November and the first couple weeks of December. First thing you want to remember is you want to layer up. It's no different than if you've gone deer hunting before or turkey hunting or anything like that. You want to wear layers because you can always take layers off, but you can always add layers on depending on what the weather is. So what I like to do is I like to have a nice pair of pants, camo pants, for if we're hunting in a field or something like that, where you're not necessarily gonna be getting wet. We got some waders here too. We'll talk about in a little bit. But just a nice pair of camo pants that are big enough that you can add. If you want to add a layer of long underwear on underneath, or if it's warm enough, you can wear a pair of shorts under it. And if it gets too warm, you can always just pop these off. And early September and stuff like that for our early goose season in Wisconsin, sometimes it can be in the mid to upper 40s one morning, and then the next morning it's 85 degrees by 8 o'clock in the morning already. So a little bit of variety is nice with a pair of pants like this. Talking about the layering, I like to have a nice mid-season jacket, something that I can wear either in the field, or if I have my waders on, I can tuck it into my waders, and it's a nice medium, mid-winter kind of jacket. The last thing that I think is a must too is it's always going to rain at some point during your hunting season in the fall. You want to have something that's going to be waterproof to keep you dry, because as many of you probably know, once you get cold and wet, your hunt's not going to be that much fun. So a nice jacket with I like the hoods that are attached to it that don't come off. They seem to shed the water away really nicely and keep you nice and dry. Now, talking about footwear and stuff like that, I like a pair of knee-high boots for in the field, or even if we're just going to be hunting some shallower water where I know it's not going to be deeper than the boots. You want to make sure that you have enough room in your boots that you can add a pair of socks if you need to. A lot of times we're hunting late or mid-December, stuff like that, for the end of our goose season, and you never know what the temperature is going to be. Well, if it's if you got a front coming through and the temperature is going to drop mid-morning, you want to be able to throw on another pair of socks to keep your feet warm, because as soon as your feet are cold, the rest of your body will be sure to follow. Lastly, be a good pair of waders. Every duck hunter's got his preference on waders. These are breathable material, and I used to wear neoprene pretty much all the time, and I'm starting to get back into the breathable kind, because a lot of the stuff that I'm required to do, when I'm setting out decoys for clients or I'm helping clients do other things, stuff like that, is I'm moving around a lot. And with neoprene, sitting down and standing back up, that material is stretching. And a lot of guys say, oh, well, my seams are leaking, these waders are bad, and they're sending back their waders every year. Well, what it is, depending on your hunting style, if you're going to be sitting all day and not getting up or down, you could probably get away with a pair of neoprenes. But if you're going to be up, down, or if you have to walk a little bit of a distance in and back to your spot, the breathable ones are going to be a lot better because they're made to absorb all that friction and movement, whereas the neoprene ones, you're going to start getting leaks and you're going to start wearing out that material a lot faster. The neoprene ones will be a little bit warmer. However, with the breathable ones, there's usually enough room where you can, like I said before with the pants, I can put a pair of long johns on and a pair of wader pants on underneath, and I'll be able to wear those throughout the entire season just as I would my neoprene ones. When guys are looking to get calls, they see, well, this call's $10 and then this call's $160. What's the difference? Well, the difference is the lower price calls are basically designed for anybody to walk in, grab it, and push some air through it and get a sound out of it. The higher end calls are built with a little more detail as far as how the reeds are put in and just the quality and material of the call itself. A duck and goose call is going to be one of your longest lasting investments in hunting. I mean, you think about how fast you go through, boots, or how fast you go through your jackets or your hats or your gloves or anything like that. A good quality call is going to last you a long time. A cheaper end call, you might not get quite as long of use out of it because it's the material isn't quite made as good and it's not as not built quite as sturdy and as reliable as the higher end calls. Now, when a guy asks me, hey, I'm just getting into duck and goose hunting, what do you recommend I should purchase for a duck and goose call? I usually tell them, buy the call that you can most afford. So the most expensive call that you can afford. If that's a $70 call, great. If it's a $170 call, great. If it's only a $15 call, okay. As you start working on calling, you'll realize the technique is where it really comes in to get those different notes and for those notes to sound different. And the lower end calls don't quite respond as well to the proper technique that it takes to get some of the higher end calls to produce that quality sound. There's a lot of different ways to learn how to call, and everybody does call a little bit different. The basic techniques and all the fundamentals of it are usually the same. And that's that you're not just blowing air through the call. You're not just picking up a call and just see my cheeks filling up. I'm just letting the air just that's not that. I mean, a lot of guys start out with that, and that's fine. As you go into it and you pick up more detail, you'll learn that it's more about how you control that air and how you manipulate that air through the call and break that reed over. Molt Gear has a DVD called Bad Grammar. Excellent DVD. It breaks down everything from how to control your air pressure and how to control your tongue movement and what you're doing in that to get the call out of, or get the call to make the sound that you're trying to make. A lot of guys, when they're first starting out and the first few times that they're calling at birds, they're excited and they want to just start just throwing every single kind of note that they can think of and come out with. For ducks and geese, really, if you're just starting out, just focus on one note. And for geese, I would say it's the honk. Everybody's heard a goose honk before. It's one of the basic and most easiest to learn sounds that you can make on a goose call, and just a single quack on a duck call. I'll give you an example. This would be a basic honk that I would tell a guy to work on this before he moves on to anything else. Now with that, a lot of guys would say, oh, well, I want to do a lot of the fast stuff and I want to really get into it and I want to just hammer on the call. Well, part of that is if you're just making a bunch of noise and you sound nothing like a goose, you're going to flare birds. You're going to flare birds faster than a guy that doesn't even have a call in his hand. So you really want to pay attention to taking your time and learning each note and having that note muscle memory before you move on. Now, everything that we talked about with the goose calling and calling at geese and learning just that basic first note that you can take out to the field with you and be successful in, that applies exactly the same way to duck calling. Duck calling is the same thing. You want to just learn one note at a time and work your way through it. Now, duck calling, there really isn't as many notes to work on as goose calling. There's a lot more variety, a lot more vocalizations that the geese do versus the ducks. But a lot of guys will get on a duck call, and the first thing they want to do is they see it on TV all the time. They want to do that fast feeder chuckle. Or you hear the guys that sit on the call and do the really loud hail calls. Yes, those have their time and place in a situation, but a guy that's just getting into it can seem overwhelmed when he hears guys doing that on the call and just doesn't know how to do it. Now, while you're learning those things as you go along, the first thing that I would recommend is just getting a call and practicing on a single quack. Just like the honk for the goose call, just practice a single quack and have that become muscle memory. That's all it takes. From there, after you have that, where you can, in a situation, readily grab your call and make that note without having to stumble or think about it, now you're ready to move on to some of the more difficult notes that are involved and learn where those fit in your hunting situation. I mean, if you got ducks that are cupped up and they're coming in to the spread and there's nothing else going on, I don't even get on the call sometimes. If they're locked up and they're coming into the spread and I haven't made a note yet, I won't do it. Now, if I see ducks out a distance or something like that, then maybe I'll give them a little bit of an attention getter, a little bit more of a higher end call, and just to grab their attention. And I'll work my way down and get a little bit quieter as they come in and kind of finesse them in a little bit more. And I think that's one of the things that guys mess up on, is they want to just put out a big wall of sound. And what that does, if you got 3-4 guys just hammering on their calls, all it sounds like is a bunch of jumble. And if you sit and listen, go to a park and listen to ducks, listen to geese, listen to their interactions. There's a lot of subtle, low, quiet notes that they're doing in between. And as you progress in your calling and you start picking up new notes that you're working on and stuff like that, you'll be able to see where those fit in. Goose hunting is a great example of that. We were hunting a field one time and there were guys that were hunting across the street from us, and every time we saw a group of geese, all we heard was them guys just laying on their calls and just hammering away, no stop, full bore all the way. And all that did when the geese were coming over was it just sounded like a bunch of hunters calling at them. And what we've learned as me and my buddies and stuff have gotten better over the years here is it's a rhythm. If you listen to, like I said, listening to geese in the park or in a field or something like that, there's always a rise to the dispute. You're either disputing against food or territory, and then it settles back down, and then it comes back up again, and it settles back down. Here's a little example of something like that. So I see geese crossing out in front of me. I'll get their attention maybe with a honk, and my buddy will chime in on a honk. Now the geese are turning, they're starting to come our way a little bit. Now my buddy and I are kind of feeding off of each other. One person kind of takes the lead on the roller coaster, so to speak, and gets really excited and starts throwing in more of the notes. And while he's doing that, I'm just doing in filler notes, and you'll learn about those as we get further along in talking about calling and stuff like that. And it's just you just want to make sure that you're not just hammering a wall of sound, because that just doesn't sound like real geese. Geese rise with their dispute, and then it settles back down, and then it rises up again. And the same thing with duck calling. Don't just hammer on them, hammer on them. Just let them work and kind of read off of what they're doing. We're going to talk about scouting. Scouting is by far the single most important thing that you should work on and concentrate on when you're hunting. You want to know where the birds are roosting, which is where they spend their nights, where they're feeding, and the flight path that they take to get there. Let's say you don't have permission to hunt a field that ducks and geese are going to, but you know the path that they take to get there. Well, if you can backtrack that to a source of water or even another field that's underneath that flight path, you're giving yourself an opportunity to not only convince those birds to come into that field, or you're convincing them to come back into that water. So you're still maximizing your potential rather than being 3 or 4 miles off of their flight path where they're not even going to see you or be interested in what you got to offer them. Some of the things that I like to carry with me when I'm scouting is I I keep a little notebook on me at all times. It's always in my blind bag, so I can take notes down if new birds are starting to move in later in the year, and where they're going, where we think they're going. So at a different day, we can go and start scouting in that general area. The other thing is I like to keep a big notebook. I write down everything from what we saw scouting that day, what kind of birds we saw, how many we saw, what time they were getting up and getting into the field, what time they were going back to the roost. And this really helps you document what them birds are doing, and so you know how you need to set up in accordance to what they're doing. The other thing I like to do is write down that day's hunt information. Okay, we hunted here this day, the wind was out of the northwest, it was about 10 miles an hour, the weather was sunny but breezy, we had about a 15-20 mile an hour wind, something like that. Keep a journal of your hunts and how you did that day. Let's say that day we shot 9 ducks. Okay, now we have that recorded. We go back at the end of the year and try and look at how we've done, and you'll notice patterns, and you'll be able to pick apart those patterns to emphasize what the birds were doing, and okay, tomorrow's going to have a front coming through and it's supposed to be done by 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, well, last year after a front, they were hitting this field really hard. Well, we'd like to get there on that because that might be whether it's a historical flight path that the birds take every year, or if it's just a field that they hit when they're starting to move out of town. That really helps you locate specific areas to focus on, so you're not driving around 2-3 hours burning daylight and you don't have anything to show for it at the end of the day. The other thing I like to carry is a plat book for the area that I'm hunting. This is huge for if you're trying to get permission to hunt fields or even private waterways and stuff like that. If you want to, we have a lot of people that allow us to gain access to bodies of water off of their property, and there's no way we'd be able to get that without having one of these to tell us who owns it and being able to look them up and try and get permission for it. We start scouting pretty much right when the season ends. I mean, we're looking back at, okay, well, this year now, all of a sudden all the birds were sitting on this body of water and not this body of water. All right, well, let's go check it out in the spring and see what that has to offer, and maybe why were they sitting in that body of water. Was it too much pressure on the bigger lake that they were sitting on, or is it that there's a new food source now in there, whether it be if there's a cornfield right next to it or something like that drew them to want to roost right there in that specific area. Ducks and geese are pretty much the same when it comes to that. Their roosting spots might be a little bit different. You might not have as many geese roosting in a backwater of the river as you do a big open lake. But in general terms, you're going to be able to find a flight path to a food source, and that's what you want to know. Thanks for tuning in to Xcel Outdoors. I'm Matthew Solberg. We'll see you out in the field. We're going to hopefully get some good hunt footage for you and talk a little bit more about decoy spreads and decoy placement, both duck and geese in the field, in the water, and kind of starting to get more into the meat and potatoes of hunting and waterfowl hunting. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Take care.